Hello there, everyone. I'm Gaylen Morse, and welcome to Journey to Recovery. We appreciate you listening. Our podcast today is entitled Transform Your Thinking. In mental health problems and in addiction, people often end up having pessimistic and negative thoughts and beliefs. Today's podcast will help you recognize those negative thoughts, refute and replace them with positive, success-oriented, and hopeful thoughts and beliefs. Our host is Dr. Hal Baumchen, a licensed clinical psychologist and licensed alcohol and drug counselor. He's an author, speaker, and clinician with over 30 years of counseling experience. I'm here today with Tim Bode, Operations Director at Northland Counseling Services, and with Dr. Hal Baumchen, our host at Journey to Recovery. How's everyone doing today?
Doing well, Gaylen. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Doing well. Feeling positive? I hope so.
Well, that's an appropriate question for today, Gaylen, because in today's podcast, we're going to look at the thoughts and beliefs that influence our feelings and actions. And these thoughts can be either positive or negative.
I think in the treatment centers where I work, and even in the Bridges program, that intensive outpatient treatment program, people who are depressed often are very negative. People who are anxious are often worried, and that can look kind of negative as well. And things aren't going to go right, and I'm worried that things are going to go all bad for me. So it's a very important topic in substance abuse and in mental health. When the thought is negative or pessimistic, it may lead to those worrisome and depressive feelings and thoughts, and then that's going to end up changing how we act. So we're going to have these poorly planned actions that go along with those negative thoughts. And negative thoughts include things like distortions, inaccuracies, misperceptions, doubts, deceptions even, and then the lies you tell yourself. So we've got a lot of things to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any negative thoughts, Dr. Hal?
I would have to admit that I get worried, and oftentimes I worry about being approved of. So I worry about that. So it's a negative thought, like people aren't going to like me or approve of me. And in fact, Gaylen, just as a funny, I get so starved for approval, I go to Home Depot just to slide my card through the card reader so it says approved. That's how starved I can be. So I would say, yeah, I do. How about you, Tim?
I tend to have the negative thought that I'm never doing enough.
Yeah.
No matter what I do, it's not enough.
Could have done it better, because we talked about that perfectionism or that drive thing that we all have. Yeah.
Yep. So, as you said, thoughts, feelings, and beliefs often become confused and distorted, and I think especially in the case of substance use and abuse.
Right. And when we have co-occurring disorders, which is that mental health and substance abuse, I think now we have the negative thought that comes with the depression, and then the action that maybe I'm trying to escape that, and then more negative thoughts and guilt and remorse and regret. So yeah, it's a pile-on effect. Those confused thoughts, inaccurate beliefs, often lead to compromised actions. So when I'm clean and sober and in my right mind, I know I shouldn't think like that or do that. But boy, as those thoughts start to slip, become more negative, I end up doing things I shouldn't do. And in order to strengthen your recovery, really what I'm going to end up saying is you have to change the way you think and believe. And I use those two words almost overlapping, mean about the same thing for me, so I don't make a big distinction. Are you talking about thoughts or beliefs here? Kind of the same for me. Mm-hmm. And if you want to change how you feel, you're going to have to change the way you think and believe.
Mm-hmm. Isn't this true for mental health problems like depression and anxiety as well?
Right. So the anxious person, like we said earlier, worries, and the depression often would lead to thoughts like, I'm no good, or I'm inadequate, or I'm stupid. Those are depressive thoughts.
Yeah. So one of the important points that we're trying to make today is that understanding that relationship between thinking, feeling, and behavior is essential in your recovery.
And again, you've heard me say this before, that if you want to change the way you feel, you have to change the way you think and believe. And we have to be cautious about that. We're going to learn how to recognize that negative thought. We'll talk about that today. And if you want to change the way you act or drink or use, you have to change the way you think and feel. It's not just change your behavior. You have to change the thing that drives the behavior, which is your thought and belief.
Right. So we have 10 points today that we're going to talk about, the 10 tenets of self-change that will help our listeners clarify their thinking, and that will help them in their recovery.
Absolutely.
How did you come up with this, Dr. Hal?
Well, I wrote 10 points, and I was sitting in my rocking chair in one of the rooms in my house, and I began to think, like, well, how do people change? I mean, if you were going to be different, what would you need to do? And so I started thinking through that and then wrote them down. I came up with these 10 points, and it becomes for me the philosophy behind change and the philosophy behind cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, there are other great writers that talk about how to change your thinking, but I did a little more work in trying to figure out the philosophy behind that. How does that work, or why does that work? So we're going to talk through some of that today.
Right. So let's get started with those. The first of them is change is possible.
You can change yourself, but I want you to change out of respect for yourself and respect for the people around you rather than feel like you're forced to change.
In other words, don't change out of obligation, out of feeling forced to change.
Once there's somebody pushing on you, then you're going to resist. At least I do. If I feel forced, commanded, demanded, made to be different, like, oh yeah, well, I don't want to. And I think a lot of people are like that. So we want to change. We want to accept this. Change is possible, but I'm going to change out of self-respect. I'm going to change because I chose to.
Yeah. Number 2 is the foundation of change is a change in your thinking.
That's right. So we have to change the way we think and believe.
If you think the same, you'll stay the same.
Right. Yep. So again, I get into these loops, these repetitive thoughts that I've been with for many years. The I'm inadequate, or I'm no good, or I'm an idiot. And you stay with that long term. Well, that loop we got to find an off-ramp here. We've got to change that way of thinking.
Yep. Number 3 is that change is made possible through simple but systematic efforts in a single direction over time.
Right. So spending time and effort in a single direction and making it more positive. But we've been looping over the negative one for so long, and now we're going to have to get a single direction in a more positive way and then stay at that over time. Right. And that takes effort.
I'm thinking people have a real problem with being consistent or with a consistent follow-through.
Ever had trouble with consistency, Gaylen?
No, not me.
You too?
Yes.
I think we all. I can't think of anybody who is, well, okay, one guy comes to mind, but most people are. They start out good and then they fade a little bit, or they mean well and they have good intentions but little follow through. So this whole consistency thing, that's got to be behind all that we do, all of our goals. We got to do them consistently. Right. And this change the way you think, boy, that requires consistency as well. Persistence and diligence.
Mm-hmm. Number 4 is the will to change can be developed.
Right. The will to change means I will do it instead of I won't do it. And oftentimes that resistance we talked about a few moments ago becomes like I don't want to, or I won't, or I refuse. And so we have to be willing. But that will thing, like you're talking about, I can learn about that, I can discover that, and I can develop that. I can, just as a practice, when somebody says something to you, boy, it sure is a nice day today. Try agreeing, like, oh yeah, it's beautiful, instead of like, well, it won't last. Yeah, you don't need to say that, so be willing, be cooperative, that sort of thing.
In other words, you can't be from Minnesota then. But what if that I don't want to doesn't change?
Again, that's the sticking point here. But I can learn how I can become more cooperative. I can become more willing. I can say yes more often. I can be more agreeable, and I can develop that. So to your point, I think sometimes the I don't want to continues, but we're working hard here to get that switched up, get that changed around, and I will be more willing. I choose to, I decide to, I will change.
And number 5 is a good follow-on to that, which is the ability to change can be strengthened.
Now I have the will, but I just can't. I don't have any ability. Well, even that can be developed, Tim. So those two go hand in hand, don't they?
Yes.
Now I'm willing to do it, but can you teach me some tricks here that will make me more capable of doing that?
Does everyone have the ability to change?
I think so. Although we could point to a few people in our lives who seem like they don't. They keep doing the same old dumb thing over and over again, and we might think like, you have no ability to change. But I think they're stuck in their mind, so they have the ability. It's got to be developed. Mm-hmm. They have the will somewhat, and that has to be developed also.
Right. Number 6 is the enemies of change can be identified and minimized.
So what's holding you back, and where do you compromise or give in, or where do you give up?
What are some of the enemies of change that your clients talk about?
In the residential treatment program, in the intensive outpatient treatment program for substance abuse, the guys, men and women in those kinds of programs, they talk about hanging out with old friends. You begin hanging out with old friends, you start doing what the old friends were doing. And then sometimes it's places and things or particular stressors make you vulnerable. Not getting enough sleep, being overworked and underpaid and feeling responsible and being caught up in things. And even relapse can be a stressor, which makes you more vulnerable to bad decisions in the future. Lying to somebody, trying to cover your tracks, and that can lead to more guilt, more regret, more remorse, and another relapse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and number 7 now, I think, again, dovetails with what you were just talking about, which is it is critical to understand the interaction between the environment, circumstances, and your thinking.
If I get a flat tire, then I'm entitled to feel bad and yell at myself because I was so stupid. I knew I should have bought tires. So we have to be careful that negative situations don't automatically produce negative thoughts. You know, let's get a little stop in there where, like, you get to choose how you're going to talk to yourself or how you're going to see yourself, even though you're in a negative situation. So don't necessarily link negative circumstances with relapse or negative feelings. Hey, I got laid off, so I'm entitled to be bummed out. No, you can change the way you think instead of I'm doomed, I'll never get another job, I'm so stupid, nothing ever goes my way, and I never catch a break. Why don't we change that thinking to I usually bounce pretty well. I've got good friends around me. I've probably got a connection that can help me here. So we can change the way we think.
So you don't want to give yourself permission to have negative thoughts simply because the situation is difficult.
Bingo. You said that so much better than I did. Thank you. Listen to him, everybody. That's right.
All right, number 8, thoughts rule. Thoughts rule. So perceptions, attitudes, and feelings are influential lobbyists, but they're not decision makers.
Right. I like the term lobbyists. They put a lot of pressure on our thoughts. If your feelings put a lot of pressure on you, but they're like lobbyists throwing money and time at a particular thing, but they're not the decision maker. The lobbyist isn't the decision maker. Your thoughts are the decision maker. Don't let somebody else be your decision maker, and don't even let your own feelings decide for you. Think it through.
So what kind of question would you be asking if you were, let's say, buying a car based on facts?
I think I'd be asking maybe what kind of mileage this car gets, or how much does it cost? Is it going to be good in a Minnesota winter?
Is it reliable?
Yeah. Is it reliable? Right.
What about buying a car based on feelings then?
I want to know the color. I want to know how I feel in it when I get in it.
How fast does it go?
Yeah.
If you're a teenage boy, you might want to know if it attracts girls.
Yeah. Or,
Yes.
Or what will my friends and family members think of me if I owned a car like this?
Yeah, right.
So those are feelings. So you could buy a car based on facts. You could buy a car based on feelings. Most people would agree that you kind of want a little combination of them. You don't want to feel miserable in the car that you bought just because it gets good mileage. But so you want to kind of blend those together. But again, we really want facts to have kind of a dominant position here, or truth to have a dominant position, or our thoughts and beliefs to have a dominant position, and be colored by feelings and attitudes and perceptions.
Right. Okay, number 9. Number 9 is healing for psychological pains of the past requires a change in your thinking in the present.
Right. So I care deeply about what happened to you in the past. Really, I do. I don't want to minimize that. I care about that. But I care even more what you began to think and believe about yourself because of what happened to you in the past. So let's say you were abused as a kid, tied up with extension cords, thrown in a closet and stomped on. Terrible things. And so I care about that. Now, what did you begin to believe about yourself because of those horrific events? Well, I began to believe that I was damaged goods, that nobody could like me, that I was unusable, worthless, that I was inadequate and inferior. Those are my thoughts and beliefs about myself because of what happened. Well, we can't change what happened to you in the past. That's unfortunate that we can't change it. But we can change what you think and believe about yourself because of what happened to you in the past. So I'm inadequate, I'm worthless, no one will ever like me. All of those are distortions. Those are not true. So we want to change that.
Well, that brings us to number 10. Successful change is inspirational. Motivational momentum can be maximized.
Your success at changing just fuels that. Like, hey, I am making some progress. I'm getting some things right. And then people like that. So then, they're applauding you and high-fiving you and wanting to be around you. And that is motivating too. And you got a little positive momentum going in your life. And so good things bring other good things, and good things bring good people, and then brings good feelings and good attitude and that sort of thing. So all of that, that gets some positive momentum rolling in your life.
Dr. Hal, one of the concepts that you talk about on this subject is the idea of automatic negative thoughts, or ants. Can you explain that idea for our listeners today?
Negative thoughts influence your feelings, but they can pop into your mind almost automatically. So you drop your keys on the floor and you have that thought in your mind like, I'm an idiot, or you smash your finger with a hammer. Have you ever done that?
Yeah.
Don't you? Like, I got to change the way I think. Actually, I'm trying to change not slamming my finger so often. But yeah, when you do a negative thing, we often say negative things to ourselves about ourselves. Now, the big deal for me is we're always moving in the direction that we think and speak. And so if you think and speak positively to yourself, about yourself, to other people, you're always moving in that positive direction. Hey, I'm making progress. I'm getting some things done right here. If you're thinking and speaking in that more negative direction, I can't do anything right, I'm so stupid, nothing ever goes my way, and I never catch a break, we're moving in that negative direction because that's the way you think and speak. So we got to watch for those automatic negative thoughts, and we're going to talk through maybe how we can handle that.
So worry, anxiety, depression, I'm sure they're all loaded with negative thinking or distortions.
Yeah, automatic thoughts that pop into your mind that this isn't going to go right. There's that worry, or I'm a loser. There's that depressive thought. So those things, anxiety and depression, are filled with that, and so is substance use. Hey, I need an escape. I got to get out of this. I need a drink. I can't stand this anymore. I can't stand it itis. I need a way of escape.
Dr. Hal, is it true that at first it may be difficult to identify those distorted thoughts?
Absolutely. I think, and even in my own mind, my own life, I've said some negative things to myself about myself, and it took a while for me to kind of get better at recognizing that was a thought that I could examine more carefully.
So don't negative thoughts fuel addiction, make it difficult to change?
Yeah, it's just we've got the bad habit, then layered in with bad thoughts or negative thoughts about myself, which produces more of the negative action, like the substance use, which layers in more guilt, more regret, more remorse, and more negativity. So, yep, it fuels it, makes it worse, and keeps us locked and stuck.
So, Dr. Hal, how do you manage those automatic negative thoughts? Can you give our listeners some tips to do that?
Yeah, they pop into your mind, and like, what? Here it is. Once again, I think the first thing for me was to recognize that it was a negative thought. So I had to hear it more plainly. Like, now it's staring me in the face, calling me an idiot or some you loser, you worthless thing, and one of our clients called herself skin-covered garbage. Well, I want you to recognize that as a negative thought. And then when you recognize it, you can refute it. Hey, that's not true. I'm not skin-covered garbage. Then almost immediately, I want you to find a replacement for that. You're not skin-covered garbage. You're making progress, or you're God's child, or something positive that I want you to say to yourself about yourself. And then I want you to repeat that, because I'll bet you've repeated the negative one many times. So let's try to repeat that positive one. So just to go over that, so recognize the negative thought, then refute or kick it to the side, refute the negative thought, then replace it with something positive, and then repeat the positive thought many times. And guess what? Here comes another negative thought. So you might have to repeat the whole process. So those 5 R's: to recognize, to refute, to replace, to
rehearse.
to rehearse. Thank you. And then to repeat the whole process. Thank you. So, Gaylen, maybe we should, that was a lot, wasn't it?
Well, it's been an interesting program, and I'd like to say thanks to everyone for listening to today's podcast entitled Transform Your Thinking. You can download other materials that will help you develop skills to identify emotional problems, reduce symptoms, and prevent relapse at journeytorecovery.com. We've been visiting with Dr. Hal Baumchen, a licensed clinical psychologist and licensed alcohol and drug counselor. I'm Gaylen Morse. Thanks for listening to today's program. See you next time on Journey to Recovery. Remember, recovery is a journey. Enjoy the ride.